Hey guys, John here from Sonic Drive Studio, and as always, I hope you're doing well and welcome back to the channel. In today's very fun video, we're going to do a quick comparison between my Friedman JJ JR tube amplifier and an ML Sound Lab guitar plugin suite. And also talk a little bit about the differences between tube amplifiers and digital emulations. We're now living in a time where in the digital realm, very accurate emulations can be made of analog hardware and tones, basically. And honestly, I think that's great. As you can see, I'm a huge fan of tube amplifiers. I mean, that's quite obvious. I own plenty of them, but I'm also a very big fan and user of various digital emulations. I mean, physical modelers, but also plugins. A lot of digital emulations these days sound so good that when you use them, you're not really compromising on tone anymore. But both real amplifiers and digital emulations, let's say plugins, do have their strengths and weaknesses. What's great about an amplifier is that you've got this physical amp to deal with and these physical knobs. There's something nice about that. And when you plug in, as long as the amp has been maintained well, you just know that you're going to get a great tone with authentic tube sounds, right? There are drawbacks, of course, though. I mean, amplifiers do take up space, they can be a little bit heavy, they require maintenance, and when you've played through them on a recording, for example, you can't really go back and change the settings unless you do a physical reamp. With a plugin, you can do that, of course. You can just go back to the plugin and change the settings whenever you like. So that's a quite powerful feature about a plugin in your DAW. A drawback of a plugin could be that you can't really bring a plugin to your gig unless you connect your computer to a powered system. And quite often you also have a bit more variables to deal with when it comes to how the plugin responds to your playing. Input levels, for example, those can have an impact on how the plugin responds. And when you plug directly into an amplifier, you just know that the guitar signal will reach the amplifier in a proper way. So with a plugin that can sort of change a little bit depending on how hot or how soft your signal is going into the plugin. Either way, both worlds or realms are great and I love them both. And I do think honestly that they can live together in harmony these days. There's definitely no need to hate on one of the two worlds. I mean, who wants to hate on tube amps, right? And who would want to hate on plugins? They're just convenient tools for people to use. And yeah, there's that. And I do think that in terms of tone and authenticity, these days you don't have to be afraid anymore whether or not a plugin will sound authentic enough. A good guitar amp plugin will sound just fine in a mix, and I think that I've proved that in the past with my blind test comparison videos as well. Do they always sound exactly the same? No, of course not, but there are many variables that contribute to that. Now let's have some fun and compare my Friedman JJ JR tube amplifier to the ML Sound Lab plugin. Now, as far as I know, there are no emulations out there of this exact amplifier. This is, of course, the mini version of the JJ, and this one has two EL84s in the power section, for example, so it has a different power section than the big boy, which has, I guess, four EL34s in the power section, so it has a lot more headroom. And most of the amp simulations that I know of that recreate the JJ, they emulate the big boy, as does the ML Sound Lab Flagship plugin. That one has the JJ 100 in there, so that's really cool. It also has two other Friedman amps emulated in there as well. Since the plugin was based on the big boy, the 100 watt amplifier, and I'm using the small one here, there are bound to be differences because of that fact alone. And the amp model is also simply based on a different physical amplifier. So you've got component values and stuff like that that will also play a part. And the amp model was also created with a different type of load that I'm using here. So that's also going to play a little bit of a part. So because of those differences and more, I'm not sure if we can dial them in to sound exactly the same, but we're going to try to make them sound as close as possible. So let's compare them right now in a little blind test first, and let's see if you guys can guess which one is which. Which one is the real Friedman and which one is the ML Sound Lab plugin. Here we go. right. I don't know about you, but in the mix they sounded pretty darn close. Digital versus analog aside, what did you guys think? Could you hear that one of them was based on the bigger amplifier and that one of them was the smaller amplifier? I will say that this little guy with the EL84s does a great job of sounding like a big boy amplifier, as long as you keep the master volume at a reasonable level. So that's great. It's a really cool amplifier indeed. I'm not going to annoy you guys with a review later on for this video. So what we're going to do now is check out that same comparison, but this time with the isolated guitars, and I will also reveal the results. Here we go. Great. So obviously when you hear them isolated, the differences become a little bit more clear and you can hear the differences a little bit better. But I still think that they sound pretty darn close. What do you guys think? Let's take a quick look at the settings that I used. On the real amplifier, I'm using the JBE mode, which is the more saturated mode. It's very nice and chunky indeed. And as far as the controls, I'm not doing anything super drastic aside from the bass control, which I'm cranking up all the way. And I stole that setting from Jerry himself. And I'm also cranking the gain quite a bit for that nice saturation. And this amplifier was being fed into my RedSeven Amplification Amp Central reactive load, and then into an ML Sound Lab IR from the Mega OS cabinet, and I'm using the Almighty mic mix. And the plugin went through the exact same IRs, by the way. With the plugin, I did have to dial in the controls a little bit differently than on the real amp, which is what usually happens with these types of comparisons. But you know what? The controls are there to be used after all. These smaller EL84 type amplifiers do tend to have a little bit more mid-range going on and a bit more of a tighter low end. So on the amp plugin, for example, what I did to sort of emulate that a little bit is crank the mid control up quite a bit. And on the plugin, I also decided to enable the boost pedal to make it sound a little bit more focused and tight. So with those settings, you can make the plugin sound quite close to my real little amplifier over here. So that's really cool. So can amp sims replace real amplifiers? Is one better than the other? Or can they live happily together? I think the latter is the case, but of course I'd love to know your thoughts, so be sure to let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on this subject. That's all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons down below, as that really helps the channel out. I'd hugely appreciate that, so thank you. You can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hope to see you soon. Cheers!